starting the recording. So for the people watching the recording, this is just a quick overview of how to review EasyConfig pull requests, mostly targeted towards maintainers. So this is a high-level overview of the things I would like to discuss and show. So how we do reviews of EasyConfig pull requests, and I'll use the example on the right, since that looks like a well-suited one. How we do testing, and then how we do merging as well. I'm sure some of these topics will be discussed a bit out of order, but that's fine. So first of all, I usually take a quick visual look at a pull request. Now this one has already been at least touched on by two other maintainers, but that doesn't prevent me from taking a look at it as well. I usually take a quick look here for anything that looks suspicious. This looks pretty okay at first sight. This is for a Python package, an update, or at least a new toolchain version of something we already have. It has what looks like a decent sanity check, not a whole bunch of complicated dependencies. It needs to be at the full toolchain because it depends on SciPy bundle. So this looks pretty okay, just visually. But one thing you definitely want to do is compare this with existing EasyConfig files. EasyBuild has an easy tool for that, review PR. You just pass it the pull request number. And what this will do is EasyBuild will go look for EasyConfig files for this software that are already merged into develop, and it will do a comparison with those. If it finds multiple EasyConfig files, it will compare with all of them and give you a multi-diff overview. So usually a diff is a one-to-one comparison, but you can also diff one file against multiple others and then sort of summarize the differences. My laptop is a bit slow today, so this is taking a while. It's actually pulling in develop in the background, which is a bit of a download. So maybe that's why it's slow. While that's going, you can definitely go ahead and test the pull request already. So I just did a quick check here for the same pull request, what is still missing. And I have all the dependencies, including the toolchain, already in place on this test system. So this should be easy to test. Initially, you can just use from PR to see if it's working at all for you. So EasyBuild will go ahead and install that, see if it works. Meanwhile, the review is still running. Now, this should be quick since it's a Python package. That's also why this is a pretty good example. Oh, and it's not happy with my terminal width.
Question, Kenneth. If you do
Yes.
a from PR, wouldn't you also want to pass a -- rebuild?
In general, yes. In this case, that's a good point.
In this case, you didn't have it yet, but if you would have, I don't know, one out of two EasyConfigs that were in this pull request, you want to rebuild it, I guess.
Yes, you want to rebuild. You want to rebuild all the EasyConfigs touched in the pull request. So you need a rebuild or a force and a robot to make sure they're done in the right order.
Okay.
Let me show you the alias I have because I don't like typing long commands. Yeah, this seems to be going well. It's already doing the sanity check. Looking back at the review PR, in this case, EasyBuild found one EasyConfig file that we already have, which is for BC Bio GFF. In this case, it seems like there are no multiple ones, so it's a single diff comparison. What has changed? This comment was added. That's fine. The version was changed, of course. The version suffix was removed, which makes sense because for the newer toolchains, we don't add the Python version suffix anymore as long as it's for Python 3. So that's okay. The toolchain was bumped. Checksum was changed because the version was changed. This all makes sense. And the dependencies were also updated. And other than that, there are no changes compared to this existing EasyConfig file. So that looks pretty good. So there's nothing suspicious in here, or there's nothing that we may need to take a closer look at in terms of why something has changed. The test installation completed here with from PR. I have an alias, not an alias apparently, then it must be a function. Okay, so I have a function that does forced rebuild, enables robots, and does an upload test report for a pull request that's pulled in by from PR. So I don't always use this one sometimes, but yeah, I don't always use this one directly. Sometimes I do the test installation first, just especially for bigger PRs, just to see if it works on my system. But for small things like this one, I would just do an upload test report straight away, assuming it will work. And if it won't work, or if it doesn't work, then it can take a closer look. So in this case, I would actually do, just to type it out as a whole, from PR, do a rebuild, enable robot. That's mostly useful in case there's multiple easyconfig files in the pull request. I have debug there as well, but that doesn't matter. And then upload test report. So that's actually how you test a pull request, make sure all the easyconfig files are tested, and then also upload the test report into the pull request. So you should see this popping up here really soon. One other thing which I also mentioned here for testing is you should always ask the bot to test as well on the Generoso test cluster we have. That's for a couple of reasons. It's like our standard test system. So if it doesn't work there, it's going to potentially also cause trouble when testing other PRs. So it's very good, or even required, that it succeeds there. And the EasyBuild configuration on Generoso is also a bit specific. So we do some tweaks in there to make sure that some things get tested well. So it's always worth asking the bot to test there. That should be possible for all you three already. That only works for maintainers or let's say frequent contributors. So the bot has to listen to you basically. The very basics of that is that you just post a comment like this, please test at Generoso, and I have a saved reply for that here. So just so I don't make any silly typos. Then there's two things you can add. You can request for a certain amount of cores. So by default, it will do 4 cores. If it's a big thing, you can ask for additional cores by specifying a core count. And you can also give additional arguments for the EB command. So for example, if I want to force a download, I can add force downloads as an option to EB. So by default, it will pretty much do what I did here when testing. So from PR, a rebuild, a robot, and an upload test report. But you can tweak that if you want to. I'll keep this one at the default. So if you post a comment like this, there's a cron running every 5 minutes that checks for new requests. And if it's a request by somebody that the bot trusts, it will go ahead and do that test on Generoso as well. What else? Okay, so things to keep an eye on a bit when doing certainly the visual review, or at least something I certainly try to keep an eye out for. So some of these things, or none of these things actually, are currently hard enforced. And with that, I mean the test suite, the easyconfig test suite doesn't fail. So very often, and I'll try to find a good example of that, we do have failures in the test suite, and then we expect those to be fixed by making additional changes to the easyconfig. These 3 are actually things that we're not strictly enforcing yet. Maybe we will at some point, but it's also not very easy to enforce it everywhere. So one thing is a sanity check command. Now in this case, actually a bad example because for Python packages, there is a default sanity check command that does the import of the Python package. That always happens, even if you don't tell it. And in this case, it will use an import using this Python module name. So you can tweak that if needed. By default, it will take the name of the software and do it lowercase and replace dashes with underscores, because otherwise it won't work in Python. So for a Python package, it's okay. For other stuff, we usually try to have an -- help or the -- version command. So at least for some of the binaries included in the package, we make sure that it runs. If it's pure libraries, only lib.a and lib.so files and header files, then of course there's no real good sanity check commands that you can add. So don't try to write a good example or something. So to check you can link with the library, that's maybe a step too far. First, then yeah, for old tool chains. So if you see people opening pull requests with old tool chains, and that's currently anything older than, let me actually peek at the documentation. I think it's 2019A. So older tool chains are deprecated. Let me look at FOSS here. Yeah, anything older than 2019A is deprecated. So there, at the very least, don't spend a lot of effort in reviewing or testing a pull request or trying to get it working, because that's probably mostly lost effort. So there's a little point in doing that. So you should probably point the contributor to the documentation on that, ask them why they're using this old tool chain, and also tell them that we have very little bandwidth to spend time on these old tool chains. And then another tool chain aspect is keep an eye on whether people are using a full tool chain or a proper sub tool chain. So for example, GCC core or something in between. In this case, it was clear that the only option is to use a full tool chain because it was depending on SciPy bundle, which lives at the full tool chain. So at this point, there's no other option. For some tools that have very little dependencies, it may be possible to move it to GCC core, for example. But that's actually getting more rare that people overlook that aspect. So the bot is still testing. In a minute or so, it should probably come back with an answer that it's also working there. And yeah, if you can, try to submit additional test reports from somewhere else than Generoso. I did it on a CentOS 7 cluster. Generoso is testing on Rocky 8, so or CentOS 8 basically. So usually different operating systems, and if you can, different CPU architectures. So maybe a test on an AMD system would be nice here as well. For a Python package, it's usually overkill. For other stuff, it may be more important to test on a broader range of systems. So all of this looks pretty good. So I think we're getting really close to be able to merge this. The test, checkout, review PR looks pretty clean. So let's try and get this merged. Now, usually we use merge PR. So EasyBuild can merge pull requests for you. If you do merge PR and again the pull request number, it will go ahead and check a couple of things that we want to make sure are correct in the pull request. So that includes the target branch should be develop. Nowadays, that's not really a big problem anymore because develop is the default branch as well. There should be a milestone set. That's not the case yet. There should be a label set. That's not the case yet. There should be valid or working test reports, or at least the last test report should be working. So that's the only restriction that merge PR does. And also there has to be an approved review. So here, Adam actually requested some changes. We can go and check back what that was about. Okay, this is a suggestion to fix the failing test suite. So he was adding a local variable without using the local prefix. So that was indeed fixed. So either we can wait for Adam to get back to this PR, or we usually, certainly for trivial changes like this, we can dismiss the review and say requested changes made. So we can dismiss this and then submit our own approved review because we did a thorough check with review PR. Looks good to me. So that's already one thing that merge PR was complaining about here. There was a missing approved review. It's happy with the develop branch. It's happy with the test suite that passes. So that's the green tick mark in the last commit. The last test report is successful. In this case, that's one by Sebastian, who just submitted. No pending change requests. That failed because the review I just dismissed was still there. There's no milestone set yet, so that's something we have to fix. Since this is ready for merge, we just use the, oh, not a project, a milestone. Since it's ready for merge, we just tag it for the next release. And we also checked with review PR what this is. This is an update, a version or a toolchain update of the software. So the main ones here are updates, bug fix, new for new software. And if things are changed, it could be also marked as a change. So change is usually to make sure that it gets clearly mentioned in the release notes of the next EasyBuild version.
So it doesn't enforce us to set a label, right? So that's something we have to think about ourselves.
Yeah, currently merge PR doesn't enforce any labels. Maybe it should, that at least there's one label there. But the labels are, let's say, less important because we can easily fix those when we go through all the PRs when doing a release. So at that point, we usually make sure that there's labels for everything. But this is actually something that merge PR should also trip over, I guess. Yeah. So let's see. I just ran merge PR again after fixing all those things. It was happy with everything, so it went ahead and merged the pull request for us, and it sends a nice thank you to the contributor as well. So try to use merge PRs so you don't overlook these things, except for the labels. That's helpful. And I guess that's it, at least for the things I had in mind. There was also, I was going to show one more thing. What was that about? Well, maybe here for something that fails the checks. Let's see if there's an easy one. This may be an easy one. So usually when the test suite fails, this has lots of dependencies that need to be merged first. So it's actually a good example. If the test suite fails, the bot should give you the last bit of output from the test suite so you can tell what went wrong. Now, this also goes to the contributor. They should get a notification of this. And usually that's enough that the contributor knows what to fix. But if not, or if you don't see the pull request being updated, maybe try to give them a pointer and go into the file overview and add a suggested change. For example, this toolchain is wrong, it should be something else. In this case, it doesn't make sense because it's clear it's because of the dependencies that it's failing the test suite, but that's okay. For this particular one, all of these are still open. So that's actually a well-structured pull request because it's clear you have to step through these first before you can even look at these, at this particular PR. If all of these are merged, that's also something I should mention here. You can use ED sync PR with develop. So what that will do, once all of these are merged, this will update the branch of this pull request with current develop, which means all of these will be included. It will add a new merge commit into the pull request, and it will trigger or retrigger the test suite, and hopefully then things go green. I won't do it here because none of these have been merged yet, but I hope you get the idea. So that's one way of retriggering the tests. You can also actually do that manually. At least I hope you can as a maintainer. So if you go to the test, there's a rerun all jobs button here on the top. That should actually be enough if the pull request got merged already, because this will, when it reruns the test suite, it pulls in the latest develop, and that should be enough to pass all those checks. There's cases where it's not, and then usually a sync PR develop does do the trick.
So rerun all jobs triggers a sync PR with develop?
No, sync PR with develop is no. That's a
separate thing.
Yeah. So you have two ways of rerunning the test suite. Either you use the button on GitHub that just reruns the same thing without adding any commits at all. It does pull in the latest develop because that GitHub workflow always pulls in the latest develop whenever it runs the test suite. So you're basically running the pull request on top of latest develop. But sometimes that's not enough, depending a bit on how the PR was done. If it was done with new PR, it's usually okay, but not always. For example, if there was a fix in the test suite itself in develop, then just retriggering in GitHub is often not enough, because you're not pulling in the changes from the test suite itself. That's like a chicken egg situation. If you do a sync PR with develop, it will do a merge of develop into this branch, push it into the pull request, so you get an extra merge commit, and then you're fully in sync with latest develop. That usually works because as a maintainer, you get write access to the branch of the contributor unless they hard disable that. So they actually get the option in GitHub to disable that. And then when you try this, the git push that's being done will fail. And then you're stuck either to ask the contributor, please sync your branch with develop, so they can run it manually, or they can do the update manually with git commands if they want to. And the same for, let's say, trivial fixes. Let's see if there's something here. Well, for example, if you're not happy with this homepage, even in the GitHub interface, you can say, okay, I think this is a better homepage. You just add a short commit message here, and you commit directly to the branch. So this will update the pull request in place. For trivial things, that even could include adding a sanity check command, for example. You could do it like this and just straight update the easyconfig in place if you think that's a change that the contributor would be okay with. If it's making multiple changes or changing something that perhaps the contributor did on purpose rather than just overlooking it, then it's better to submit a review and ask them to change it, or ask them why they did something in particular. So
where did you do this? I missed that part.
Where did you do the changing of the file?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you click here on the triple dots, you get an edit file.
Okay. And that is something that we as maintainers can do, but not everybody.
No, not everybody, no. So only maintainers of the repository, and only if the contributor allowed write access to branches for maintainers of a repository. That's the default setting, so most people have it like this. Yeah. But you can disable it. But Compute Canada has this disabled, for example. So in their repository, you can never add stuff without them approving it. So that's an easy way out. Another option, which I sometimes do, but that's usually for bigger changes. Maybe I can show that. So if I go to my checkout of easyconfigs, I have like this. I have remotes defined for people who often contribute. So in this case, this is for Adam's pull request for Durin. This is his remote. So I can actually pull in his branch using this remote. This will be a big update, probably. Pulling in lots of stuff. But then I can do a checkout of his branch that was used for this pull request. I can then change something in the file, for example, a different home page. Commit this. This is not going to be very descriptive, of course. Commit this, then push the branch to my fork on GitHub. So as you can tell, this is way more work than just doing it manually in the web interface, certainly for something trivial. But if you want to propose changes, this is a good way. So here you need to make sure you're targeting the right person and the right branch. Must be this one. Yep. So now there's a single commit in here, a clean diff. And if I do create pull request, this goes to Adam. And usually I mentioned something like proposed change for this pull request. So they can take a look at this, see if they're happy with it. If they merge my pull request with their branch, the pull request here will be updated automatically as well. So the commit is added here. So that's a bit more, let's say, friendly way of proposing changes rather than hard pushing them in yourself. And it's also another option next to making suggested changes here. So you can also do inline comments. So that's basically pushing the effort back to the contributor while making a pull request. You do it yourself and you propose it as changes. Yeah, it depends a lot on the particular pull request or even the contributor, how proficient they are, how active they are. It depends on all kinds of topics. Okay. Something else?
If you've proposed some changes and you notice that somebody didn't make it in, let's say, 2 weeks, that might also be a reason to just do it yourself, right? If it's whatever,
Yes.
changing the web address, then just push it.
For trivial things like adding a missing comment or fixing a home page or removing an empty line, adding a sanity check command, I usually push those things in myself because
you would do it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, usually it depends a bit on who the contributor is.
Yeah.
Sometimes for new people, I may do a proposed change first and see how they react to it. But if it's somebody who has 20 pull requests open and opens them every week, like all 3 of you, for example, I wouldn't even bother to ask you and bother you and just push it in and go ahead and merge it. If that's the only thing left to merge the pull request, I usually push it in, redo the test, or ask Generoso to redo the test, and then do the merge PR myself. So we should usually look for ways to get pull requests merged, not to look for ways to keep them open, because we have enough of them open. So if it's trivial enough, I often do it myself. And you're right, for bigger things, certainly more complex things, you can either make suggested changes, or if you're up for doing the work yourself, make a pull request to their branch. And then if they don't respond back, we can still push that straight into the pull request and just still get it merged. So you can also see how the contributor reacts to that. So there's no golden rule there. It depends on a lot of things. Also on how much effort you want to spend on it yourself, of course. Maybe something more general. How do you pick pull requests to work on? That's an interesting one. Usually, it depends a bit on the mood I'm in. I focus on recently updated pull requests, so you can sort them here, recently updated. Sometimes I look at things that are an easy merge, like this one looks like it could be an easy merge. This is a new software that we don't have yet, so this will need to at least need a closer look because you don't have anything to compare with. Review PR will just tell you this is new. I don't know what to compare it with. So software updates can be quick to get handled. Some other ones, like if it involves PyTorch, it's probably a bit more work because you know the test report is going to work or is going to take a while. If we're closer to a release, I'm often focusing on bug fix PRs. You can filter them by label as well. Then I try to look at these things a bit more and try to find ways to get those merged or see what's still missing or why the pull request got blocked. I often also look at who the contributor is. So if it's infrequent contributors, let's say this one, I think Frederick is actually new or certainly hasn't opened a lot of pull requests yet. Yeah, and GitHub is even telling you. So this one is by a new contributor and the tests are failing. So maybe they need a push in the right direction to get the tests to work. And in this case, it looks like they're using the version suffix, even though it's a new tool chain. So they're probably not aware of the change we made, which is not a surprise if they're a new contributor. And there's missing checksums. So both of those are pretty easy to fix. So this is a case where use your best judgment. Do you make the changes yourself? Because they're quite easy to do, or do you point it out to the contributor and say, hey, tests are failing because you overlooked this and this. Are you up for making those changes? Since Frederick is new, I would probably do the second thing in this case. So point him out what's wrong, and hopefully give him enough confidence to keep opening pull requests and give us more stuff.
Yeah, it gives you an opportunity, or them an opportunity to learn, I guess.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
indeed. If this is somebody who has opened 100 pull requests already, I'm probably not going to bother to ask them to fix these things because, first of all, because the bot made it pretty clear what's wrong. And if they're not up for fixing them, me asking again is probably not going to help. Or they're just too busy and they have GitHub notifications disabled, which many people have. Yeah, so figuring out what to work on is also, that's very personal, I would say, and depending on how much time you have. And I also use this Octobox thing, this one. So that's a separate tool to look at your GitHub notifications. It gives it for all GitHub repositories, not just EasyBuild ones, but you can easily filter stuff. For example, only for easyconfigs and only from Sebastian. So if you're helping a particular contributor or working on a group of pull requests like the ones by Adam, for example, where he opened a pile of things. You can easily filter this down as well. This is just a bit more manageable than looking at your inbox and getting lots of emails, because then you literally drown in stuff. At least the labels are showing up here, who did it, which repository, and so on. So that's useful. And you can also see when they were updated. I usually use this when trying to figure out which PRs to take a look at. So if you want to play with that, that's a octobox.io. And I have this set up in a separate window, basically, but which just links to this. So this is very, very useful for me. It takes a bit time to get used to it, but once you're used to it, there's absolutely no way you can get back to the email flood, or even the web interface is a bit clunky. Okay. Anything else?
I have a question on the policy where we only accept one version as a dependency per toolchain generation.
Yeah.
I know that we make exceptions if the software requires it, right? So suppose we have a binary installation and that is hard linked against some version of a dependency, then yeah, there's no other choice but to allow it.
Yeah.
But then I guess you need to override the CI, right? Because the CI will still say, hey, this is not allowed. So how does that work? How do I then merge it?
Yeah, so if you get a failure like this is an example of that, where this SPOA thing is now being used in two versions, an old one and a new one. And in this case, I know for Shasta, you really need an old SPOA. So there's no way you can, well, no easy way you can get it working. So this would be eligible for making an exception. So what you do is it gives you the script here that complains. If you go and look at that script in the repository, yep, go easyconfig. I think that's the one. Yeah, line 787. So it's somewhere around there that we have a list of exceptions. 787. This is the one where it's failing, and if you look a bit up, where is it? I know we make exceptions here for TensorFlow. So some packages require a specific version, yada yada. There's this big dictionary here that says, for example, TensorFlow 1.13.1 is used as dependency for this Medaka and this thing that depends on Medaka, and that's the exception you make. So you basically map the name of the dependency that's being used and the version to where it's used as an exception. So for the SPOA thing, you would add SPOA as an entry here, and then whatever version it was, 340. So you add a new entry in this dictionary, and you add a tuple that has 340 and maps it to the list of easyconfigs, or at least the names of easyconfigs to that kind of, prefixes or names of easyconfigs. So you would have to add SPOA, the version, and Shasta in here as in the list, and that would be enough to make the tests happy. And of course, if you should do that in the pull request ideally. So this could be an example where you pull in this branch and you send a pull request to the contributor that says, hey, the tests are failing because you're using an old version, and this is how we can dance around that by adding an exception. You cannot really do that.
That you updated the test file.
Which file? It's mentioned here in the error.
Ah, okay, check. Yeah.
So it's the easyconfigs.py in the test suite. And then the thing to look, I usually look for TensorFlow, that helps. But it's a separate function that does all this filtering, check depth vars. So that's the one that collects all the information that's needed to check the different dependency versions. Yeah, so that's a very good question.
I have a question about the dependencies of a package. So for instance, for the one that you just merged, the Python library, you didn't check the dependencies at all, except that they are valid in some way. So should we, for instance, go to the source repository of this package and check that indeed the right versions are being used? And should we do that for updates only, or for new ones only, and not be too strict about updates?
Yeah, that's a good point. So indeed, for updates, I'm less concerned about that, because I'm going to assume we got it right the first time. This also relates to the sanity check commands, for example. You could easily catch missing dependencies if you add a good sanity check command. And actually, for Python packages, it's quite easy to know that everything is there because of this pip check that we do in the sanity check. So we run pip check, and pip check will tell us when at least a Python package that is required by this is missing. And since the test report is working, I'm pretty sure it has at least all the Python packages. There may be other dependencies, of course. I usually don't really actively go ahead and check whether everything is there. I assume if the test report works and the sanity check command works, that it's okay. For new things, and again, also if it's contributors who are new or not, like here for Adam, I would assume he knows how to check and make sure it's okay. There was another one that was by somebody new, like, well, not this one. This is Sebastian. But for certainly new software, I would take a closer look and see, oh, do we really have everything here that is needed as a dependency? So this has no dependencies at all. Maybe I'll do an LDD on this binary command and see what it's linking to in the OS, for example. yeah, again, it depends a lot on the context, on who did the pull request, what type of software is it. If it's a Python package, I usually don't worry about it because I trust the automated checks. Or if it's somebody experienced or not, that matters a lot as well. So yeah, if you want to, I will not stop you, but it depends a bit whether it's worth the effort or not.
But you don't generally, I don't know, go to the website of the software, check the installation instructions, and from there check what.
If it's new stuff, I sometimes do. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If it's updates for existing easyconfigs, I trust we got it right the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Sometimes packages also change, like they add a new dependency or whatever.
Yeah.
It's easy to overlook also for the contributor. But it's a lot of work to always check it. That's
indeed. So it's always checking it is. I mean, it's pretty clear we're short on time for reviewing things, so you don't want to do things that 99% of the time doesn't give you anything extra. And that's also why we try to test on multiple systems. And like Generoso has a different set of RPMs installed. That's also why we want to work towards using container images for testing stuff in. Because then we can, for example, use a very minimal container image that has almost nothing, but also a very fat one that has, for example, boost in the OS, because sometimes that causes trouble when you have it, even though it's already a dependency of EasyBuild as well. So we can definitely make our lives easier there. It's probably never going to be perfect. And if there is a dependency missing, it definitely happens, certainly for optional stuff. So optional dependencies, only if they use a particular feature, that then the people who try to use the software run into an error. Yeah, we just fix that error with an update to the easyconfig file. So it's not a disaster if it happens, of course. It's not ideal, but
and what about so maybe related to the optional features? Suppose somebody does a PR and they don't enable a lot of optional features that are there. Do we accept that, or do we say no, please make it as fat as possible and enable as many optional features as possible? Or what do we do?
In general, I think we take the easyconfig as it comes in terms of optional features.
Yeah, so then we just wait until there's somebody saying, hey, I actually needed this optional feature, so I updated the easyconfig.
Yeah, somebody who cares enough about the optional features. So usually we don't try to request more effort from the contributor than they already did. Yeah. Maybe those optional things are not relevant only for them, or are not relevant in general, or cause a lot of trouble in trying to install that. Yeah, so usually we take it as is, except so if we see an update to something we already had before and they strip down the dependencies, that's a different case. Then at least they need to explain why they did that. And if they just did it because we want a minimal install, that goes against the policy of what we have in terms of keeping.
And somebody in the past probably used those optional features. That's why they're there in the previous easyconfigs.
Yeah, indeed. So if they're diverging from what we were doing before, for example, then at least they have to explain why they did it. Maybe there's a good technical reason. Maybe building with the optional dependencies got broken and you can't really build it anymore, or at least not easily. And then at least we have it in the pull request why we did a change like that.
And what about the specific versions of dependencies which are listed on the source website itself? So let's say AlphaFold, for instance, needs TensorFlow. What if you divert from the version that they use in the source repository as a dependency? Does that matter as long as it works, or do you need to give the contributor a reason to divert from that version?
Yeah, so the as long as it works is the key thing here. So it depends a bit on how well it was tested. You usually don't know if they have very strict version requirements in their requirements.txt or the setup.py, for example, and we actively diverge from that by patching out those version requirements. Then we also hope that the contributor has tested things a bit more thoroughly. Very often the sanity check commands will also tell you if you're just pulling in a new major version or something and it's just not compatible. certainly for Python stuff, then usually the import fails, and it's pretty clear. Yeah, difficult question to answer. Depends a lot on how extensive it was tested. If you see it's very, very different, then you can at least ask, did you check this? Or to what extent did you check it? I know there are cases like Medaka, for example. There's just no way you can get it working with a newer TensorFlow. So there it's almost hopeless to spend time on it. And I think we even asked, maybe, I'm not sure if we included a pointer here, to the issue, but I know there's an issue open in Medaka that asks, what about newer TensorFlow versions? And you just say, we don't have time. So either you install it like this or you don't install it at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes it also, if they're very strict on versions and you can't find the reason why, opening an issue and asking the upstream why they do that can also be a good help. If they just say, yeah, we do it because that's the way we control the versions, or we do it like this because we know it's not compatible with something, then yeah, at least you know, and you know how to deal with it. And often there's comments as well in the requirements that say why they have this or that. Either in the file itself or in the Git log, sometimes you can figure out why they were hard fixing to a particular version. It's a difficult question. There's no good answer, I think, at least not a general one. It all boils down to testing. Okay, any other questions?
There used to be some internal wiki or whatever where you had kind of an overview of things to do, right? I keep losing that link, but since we're now in this meeting anyway.
I don't think it's an internal wiki.
Or an external one, but I mean, there was something like.
Well, I mean, we only have the public EasyBuild wiki. We don't have a separate one for maintainers or something. Maybe we have.
I remember there being some maintainer instructions at some point, but
here,
I mean,
this
pretty limited, but maybe we can have another look at it.
This must be it. Last updated January 2018. Yeah, so and the large things here should still be more or less the same, I think. Testing from PR, upload test report, the options you should use. So this doesn't look terribly different from what we. This is old though. Yeah, maybe it was this one. I don't know of any other pages like this.
Yeah, I think it was this one.
Yeah. We have something in the documentation as well, I think. Contributions. Yeah, I guess that's probably an updated version of what we had in the documentation. Yeah, backwards compatibility, but that's beyond easyconfigs mostly. So we definitely keep an eye on that we don't break the installation of existing easyconfig files. Or if we make a change to an existing easyconfig file, it has to be very clear why we do that. So there has to be a very good reason for it. It sometimes happens, and then at the very least, we make it very clear that it's mentioned in the release notes why we made that change. Okay. Last option or last chance to ask questions. Anyway, if something comes to mind, feel free to ask in the maintainers channel, of course. Or if you have a particular pull request that you're not quite sure how to handle, just drop it in the maintainers channel, and somebody, I'm sure, will give their view on it, or how we usually tackle that. Okay, I'll stop the recording here.